Mushtaq, welcome to Future You.
Michael, Jeff, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, our audience, I think, at this point has a sense of the nuts and bolts of what's being changed in the Carnegie classification system. But let's dig more into the why that you're changing them. What were those changes in the higher education landscape writ large that made your team think, these classifications need updating?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Michael. Two big things. One, I mean, as your audience knows, the Carnegie classifications have been around for 50 years. And for those 50 years, they have basically operated in the same way. We have grouped institutions by the highest degree that they awarded. And that was basically the major way in which we sort of thought about grouping like institutions. Worked pretty well in 1973, and I think over the course of the 50 years, as higher education changed, the classifications didn't really change with them. And so when we took this project on at ACE in conjunction with the Carnegie Foundation in 2022, one of the things that struck us immediately was the basic classification maybe wasn't doing the best job of grouping like institutions together. That sorting institutions by the highest degree awarded meant that institutions that had 1,000 students, 500 of which were graduate students and 500 of which were undergrads, were grouped in the same bucket as an institution that had 25,000 undergraduates and 200 master's students. It just didn't work anymore. So we just thought that we needed to really take a fresh look at what are like institutions. That was thing number one. Thing number two is that the way that the classifications worked, it was really about institutions and institutional degrees. Students were nowhere really to be found in the classification. So project number two was to really try to center students. And when we thought about institutions and the way that they thought about their students, two things immediately jumped out at us as sort of being important ways for the higher education sector to be able to think about themselves. And those two vectors were access and outcomes. Access and earnings more specifically. And so we set off to go create a new classification system, one that's around student access and earnings.